or have another print disability which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello, this is Doug, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the August 12th issue of the Niagara Falls Review on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The St. Catharines Mayor launches a new independent review of flooding, stating, "Hope is not a strategy." Mayor Matt Cisco has ordered independent review into the causes of widespread flooding in St. Catharines and what can be done to try to avoid it. The review will look at how the city's stormwater system, sanitary system, and natural watercourses performed during recent storms that left thousands of homes with basement flooding, and will come up with a short, medium, and long-term action plan. Our responsibility is to continue helping where we can, while also making sure that when the cleanup is finished, we don't simply move on and hope this never happens again. Cisco said Monday during the first city council meeting since the flooding. Hope is not a strategy. Learning is. And that's exactly where our focus now turns. Learning is only valuable if it leads to action. Cisco used his strong mayor powers Friday to issue a mayoral directive to Chief Administrative Officer David Oakes to report to Council about establishing the working group for the independent review. The group will comprise engineers, infrastructure experts, environmental and emergency planning professionals, and community leaders with knowledge of the city's stormwater systems and waterways. Its goal will be to identify causes of the recent flooding and develop an action plan and funding strategy to better protect the city from extreme rainfall events. Its findings will also be used to build a business case to present to federal and provincial governments for funding. The city experienced 3 100-year storms within 11 days on July 21st, 27th through 28th, and August 2nd that dropped more than 300 millimeters of rain, overwhelmed infrastructure, and led Cisco to declare a state of emergency. He said the city's systems were placed under conditions that they were never designed to experience. The flooding was citywide. Cisco said affecting old and new neighborhoods, those with newer infrastructure and older infrastructure, areas with construction and areas where there wasn't any construction, places that had been flooded before, and ones that had never been flooded. He said the engineering staff have done outstanding work throughout the response and will continue to play a critical role. A master servicing plan looking at water and wastewater systems, which Council asked for previously and is being completed, will also help to inform the independent review. But I also believe residents deserve an independent examination by experienced professionals who can challenge assumptions, identify opportunities, and bring fresh ideas to the table, he said. The working group performing the review will include experts from engineering, stormwater management, and natural systems. It will include experts who have dealt with flooding in other communities, and the goal will be to see one very straightforward question answered. What can we do better? He said that the answer may be larger pipes, more stormwater storage, improvements to creeks and the natural drainage systems, specific projects, or changes to homeowner assistance programs. More than likely, he said, will be a combination of all these things. I also don't want this review focused only on projects that take 20 years to build. Some improvements may be long-term, but others must be achievable much sooner. Councilors, some of whom were flooded, spoke of the heartbreaking discussions and visits they had with residents impacted by the floods and had many questions about the city's infrastructure. I think it's important that we clearly acknowledge the fact that our wastewater systems operated by us in the Niagara region let us down miserably, stating the obvious here, said Port Dalhousie Councilman Bruce Williamson, whose basement flooded twice. When it faced the ultimate test, it failed, and not just in localized areas, but it was widespread. It was devastating across the north end of the city. The cost of the review and who will undertake it and the timeline are still to be determined, Cisco said in an interview after the meeting. He wants to see terms of reference drawn up and staff recruiting for the group by September. He said the idea of working with a group of local professionals with some familiarity with the city's system is being chosen because they will be able to identify what needs to be done short and long term. I don't want to spend a massive sum of money on an outside consultant to come in and tell us that it rained a lot, he said. The independent review was one of 7 areas the CAO must report back on, all related to flooding. Others include identifying neighborhoods and locations that should be prioritized for flood mitigation actions and enhancing and expanding the city's flood alleviation program, which helps fund sump pumps and other preventative measures in private residences. Staff will also be able to review the city's inspection, maintenance, and replacement practices for stormwater infrastructure, including culverts, ditches, and catch basins. It will look at improving the way people can report stormwater issues and how the city can use those reports to better prioritize maintenance. A comprehensive public education strategy aimed at helping residents reduce their residential flooding will be developed, and Cisco directed staff to arrange for a 3rd week of citywide garage pickup for flood victims, which may in turn turn into a 4th week if necessary. In a related article, flooding had devastating impact on unhoused Niagarans. It can mean losing a sleeping area, medications, and documents. While Niagara homeowners and tenants were left cleaning up flooded basements after recent torrential rains, Carolyn Dyer says people without homes were among the hardest hit in the region. Dyer, Reach's Niagara executive director, said flooding had a devastating impact on people experiencing homelessness who often have very few safe places to turn during an emergency. For someone living outside, a major flood can mean losing access to a sleeping area, loss of essential belongings, medications, and personal documents, and being displaced from the places where they normally access food, health care, and other supports, she said. As efforts continue to help people recovering from flooding after torrential rainstorms, Dyer said Reach Niagara, which provides primary health care service to marginalized and unhoused people within the region, is helping its clients recover. We are working with our community members who have been deeply impacted by floods to ensure at the very least they are getting the basic essentials, she said. In the aftermath of the storms, Niagara Region Homelessness Services has been working with partner agencies to provide outreach programs for unhoused residents, said Department Manager David Michaels. Outreach teams are checking on people's well-being, encouraging them to access emergency shelter, and connecting them with available supports, including transit passes to help individuals travel to shelter or other safe indoor locations and out of the rain, he said in an email. We will continue to monitor the situation closely and work together to respond to emerging needs and support our community's most vulnerable residents. Dyer said that the devastation left by the storms is a reminder Niagara's most vulnerable residents need help too. She called it an opportunity to reflect on how we support vulnerable community members during an emergency response when someone does not have a roof over their head or a place of safety. When an emergency happens, we need to make sure that the people who are already facing the greatest barriers are not the ones who are overlooked, Dyer said. A second fire guts a historic Crystal Beach school. Crews have demolished portions of the former Ridgeway Crystal Beach High School after fire broke out early Monday morning. This is the second fire to occur at the decommissioned building at 576 Ridge Road North, and officials say it is considered suspicious. The fire is being investigated as a case of arson by the Niagara Regional Police Criminal Investigative Branch. Just after 1 a.m., Fort Erie Fire and Emergency Services was alerted to the blaze after 911 callers reported seeing a glow coming from inside the building. Firefighters arrived to a fully involved fire, said Chief Mark Schmidt. It was well underway, he said, adding it quickly began to spread from the front of the building to other areas. A fire that occurred at the building nearly 3 years ago left damage that hampered firefighting efforts this time. In October 2023, the front section of the school, dating back to 1927, which had a heritage of designation, caught fire. Schmidt said that the 2023 fire left holes in the floors, preventing firefighters from getting to Monday morning's fire on the inside of the building. Instead, crews used a pair of aerial trucks to tackle the fire from above. Aerial trucks remain on the scene through the day Monday, dousing the structure with water in order to put out any hot spots. Fire crews left the scene about 7:30 p.m. Monday and returned it to the property owner. An excavator was brought in to tear down a wall to further get at hot spots, Schmidt said, and would be used in the tear-up of floors as well. NRP closed Ridge Road North between Nye Road and Hazel Street to assist with firefighting efforts. On Monday morning, people could be seen driving the streets behind the school to look at the damage. There were no injuries among firefighters, and no one was located in the building. Schmidt said the town's building department will determine how much of the building needs to be demolished. He said the office of the Ontario Fire Marshal was notified of the fire, but declined to investigate. He said investigators within the fire department have deemed the blaze to be suspicious. He said there were no services to the building, and demolition crews had not been at the scene since Friday. It's pretty evident it was probably intentionally set, Schmidt said. Police said detectives are asking residents and the businesses in the area of Ridge Road North to verify and review any video surveillance video footage and contact them if anything suspicious is observed. The school has sat empty since 2017 when Greater Fort Erie Secondary School, which also replaced Fort Erie Secondary School, was opened. In April 2021, District School Board of Niagara Trustees approved sale of the 6.35 hectare property that had been listed by Colliers International a month earlier for $10.9 million. No details as to who purchased the building or for how much were disclosed at that time. Prior to listing the property for sale, the school board had approached the town of Fort Erie, as it required to do under the Education Act, about purchasing the property. At that time, the building was being considered to house a community hub for the West End, but it was deemed to be too costly. The property is slated for a housing development with a mix of single detached homes and townhouses. Former Mayor Bob Saracino remembered as a devoted public servant. Bob Saracino's drive to serve the city he was born in never wavered. "I gave my life to this city," said Saracino in an interview with the Welland Tribune last autumn. Flags hung at half-mast in front of the Port Colborne City Hall Monday for the former mayor, who died on Sunday at age 88. "It's a sad day in Port Colborne," said Regional Councilman Vance Bedaway, who grew up around Saracino. Bedaway's father, Wayne, and Saracino served together on Port Colborne City Council. Saracino entered politics in 1972 as an alderman, becoming mayor in 1977. He held that position for 18 years and went on to serve another 14 years on regional council as a directly elected member. His daughter, Amy Saracino, fondly remembers his time as mayor. He took office the same year she was born and remained until her last year of high school. "I just remember how much he loved that," she said. "The city was so special for him." She has many standout memories about his desire to help people, such as when she and her dad would be about town and residents would come up to him and say, "Hey, Mayor Bob." He'd always make time to speak with them and hear their concerns, but he'd also make sure to remind his daughter how special she was, too, calling her his number one. "I've been overwhelmed with the outpouring of comments," she said about his death. Badaway and Saracino understood how public service at the municipal level is personal. Every decision impacts neighbors, friends, and the community. His name and his work are woven into Port Colborne was shaped during his years in public office, Badaway said, recalling how he and Saracino worked together on issues such as Port Colborne's hospital and preserving the city's regional police detachment. Whether you agreed with him on every issue or not, there was never any question about where his heart was. It was with Port Colborne. Mayor Bill Steele knew Saracino from when they were both members of the Junior Chamber of Commerce. He served Port Colborne very well. He had always had the best interest of the city in mind. He worked hard for Port Colborne. Dedicated member of the Legion. Outside of the political ring, Saracino was a big advocate for the Royal Canadian Legion Branch 56. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Niagara Falls Review on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. In addition to decades of commitment as a member, Saracino served as the branch's vice president for many years. In June 2024, he received life member honors. In his later years, Saracino remained a regular at the Legion branch. I try to get down there as often as I can, he said in a 2025 interview. Alexander Fazzari, Branch 56 public relations spokesperson, said the Legion won't be the same without him. Words cannot describe how much of an impact Bob has had at the community and the Legion. His loyalty, dedication, and service to the community and his passion for supporting our Legion and veterans have profoundly impacted Port Colborne and will for many years to come. Debbie Zimmerman, Chief Executive Officer of the Grape Growers of Ontario, also spoke of Saracino's passion for the Legion and his love of his country. Zimmerman knew Saracino for more than 25 years. She said she got to know him when she was regional councilor and he was still mayor of Port Colborne. He was one of the few individuals who encouraged her to put her name forward successfully to become regional chair. He took a particular interest in people that needed help. That was Bob, she said. Saracino left politics more than 15 years prior to his death, yet he remained active in local issues right up to the end, taking on the latest fight over the future of the urgent care center at the city's former hospital. He was critical of local government efforts to preserve services at the UCC, which, with Fort Erie, is to close in 2028 when a new hospital in South Niagara Falls is put into operation. The Port Colborne building is more than bricks and mortar, he said last year. It's the lifeblood of our community, said Saracino. The friend that reached out. Saracino will also be remembered as a dear friend, the one who brought people together. He would call to ask how you were doing, about your family, and how life was. Tom Lannon was one of the friends Saracino stayed connected with. They chatted on the phone all the time. The two met during Lannon's 35-year career working for the city as director of Parks and Recreation. Saracino was an alderman at that time, and they kept in contact afterwards. I'm sad to see him go, but I believe that he's in a better place, Lannon said. The end of an era. Steele likened Saracino's death to an era that's come to an end, adding that the man was the last of a line of Port Colborne mayors before the 1990s. Saracino also served on Niagara Parks Commission and Ontario Police Commission. He received many accolades, including the Ontario Citizen of the Year Award in 2013, the Queen Elizabeth Jubilee, Diamond Jubilee, and Platinum Jubilee medals, and King Charles III Coronation Medal. Saracino's wife Adele had died in April at 89. They were married for more than 40 years. He visited her daily at her home in Northland Point, the Niagara region's long-term care facility he helped establish more than 20 years ago. In his final years, Saracino admitted he would get emotional when seeing some of the projects he fought for. Among them are Port Colborne Historical and Marine Museum, the Mellenby Avenue Bridge, the water treatment plant built in 1980. Council was very good to me on these big projects, he said. Today, Port Colborne's appearance reflects the career of its most dedicated residents. On the opinion page, love, laugh, and leave fentanyl alone. The words in the headlines are the ones I've heard far too many times from one of the Niagara region's most respected judges as he addresses individuals appearing before him who are struggling with addiction. Their simplicity, coupled with their profound truth, is bone-chilling. As His Honor often addresses individuals appearing before him who are struggling with addiction, he offers a sobering reminder. It's not a matter of if fentanyl will kill you, it's a matter of when. Those words are stark and unsettling, but they reflect the devastating reality of the fentanyl crisis. As I walk past the St. Catherine's Public Library, pass through the hallways of St. Catherine's Courthouse, or simply look out the windows of my office, I am reminded that the fentanyl crisis is everywhere. It is not confined to the headlines or statistics. It is unfolding in the lives of people throughout our own community every single day. I do not pretend to have all the answers, but I do have an idea. In my opinion, part of the solution lies in creating community housing projects, places where individuals recovering from addiction can build or help build their own homes, and in doing so, rebuilding their lives. The physical act of constructing a home can instill a sense of ownership, responsibility, pride, and accomplishment many have not experienced in years. These communities would be far more than housing developments. They would be places of healing, hope, and opportunity. Residents would have access to counseling, mental health services, addiction treatment, life skills training, educational opportunities, and meaningful employment. They would also be expected to contribute to the community, fostering accountability alongside compassion. Recovery is rarely a straight path, and lasting change requires both support and personal commitment. Equally important, these communities would cultivate a genuine sense of belonging. Addiction often isolates people from their families, friends, and society. A community built on mutual respect, shared responsibility, and common purpose could replace that isolation with connection. Residents would simply not be neighbors. They would become a support network for one another, celebrating successes, encouraging perseverance through setbacks, and reminding each other that recovery is possible. When someone helps build a home, they're building far more than walls and a roof. They're rebuilding confidence, learning the practical skills, developing discipline, and rediscovering their own value. They begin to see themselves not as a burden or a statistic, but as individuals capable of contributing to a society and creating a better future. In many ways, every nail driven, every wall raised, and every completed home becomes a symbol of their own recovery, a tangible reminder broken things can be rebuilt. Such communities could also benefit society as a whole. Stable housing and meaningful employment has long been recognized as important factors in reducing recidivism, improving mental health, and supporting long-term recovery. By investing in people rather than simply managing the consequences of addiction, we create safer neighborhoods, healthier families, and stronger communities. I recognize no single initiative will solve the fentanyl crisis. Addiction is complex, and it causes deeply rooted in trauma, mental illness, poverty, and countless other challenges. However, if we truly want people to recover, we must offer more than treatment alone. We must provide hope, stability, opportunity, and a place where recovery is not only possible, but sustainable. A house can provide shelter, but a community can provide purpose, and sometimes purpose is exactly what keeps someone alive. Sydney Zarabas is a member of the Niagara Voices Community Editorial Board. He is a criminal defense lawyer at the Criminal Law Center. Another opinion states, bonus culture makes failure pay. Taxpayers shell out about $200 million a year on bonuses for government executives, even as departments routinely fail to hit their own targets. In the real world, bonuses happen when you do a good job or your organization has a great year. In Ottawa, bonuses reward deep performances, bailouts, and billion-dollar losses with taxpayer money. Let's start with Canada Post. The Crown Corporation showered its managers and executives with $30.8 million in bonuses in 2025. That same year, it lost nearly $1.6 billion and took a $1 billion bailout from taxpayers. This wasn't a one-off rough patch. Canada Post has lost money for 8 years running, totaling $5.4 billion. Via Rail is another Crown Corporation rewarding failure with taxpayer money. The government dumped $376 million into Via Rail last year to cover the train company's operating losses. Despite hemorrhaging money, Via Rail rubber-stamped $10.3 million in bonuses. Every executive took a bonus, and the average bonus payout was $115,000. Then there's Alto, the Crown Corporation dreaming up Canada's high-speed rail boondoggle. Hasn't put a single shovel in the ground, hasn't laid a single meter of track, doesn't even know the exact route for its train. Despite having completed almost nothing, it handed $2.8 million in bonuses out. Every Alto staffer took home a bonus. The Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation is also familiar with the taxpayer cookie jar. It's the government's housing agency, and it has repeatedly claimed its goal is housing affordability for all. Spoiler alert, the CMHC is failing its own goal. The CMHC handed out $31.7 million in bonuses last year, even as its own CEO admitted housing supply and affordability remained one of Canada's greatest challenges. This isn't a few bad apples, it's the whole orchard. About 90% of the government executives take a bonus every year. Those executive bonuses cost taxpayers about $200 million last year. While federal departments consistently miss their own performance targets, in 2 of the last 5 years, departments failed to meet even half of them, according to the government's data. Their best year was 2024-2025, when they hit 54% of their own targets. Picture a report card full of D's and F's that still comes with a gold star. That's what happens in the federal government executive suites. Former parliamentary budget officer Yves Giroux explained what's going on. Bureaucrats set their own targets, and they're careful to set the bar not too high, but not too low, and yet by their own assessment, they failed to deliver on many of these. Translation: bureaucrats discovered they can fail and still get rewarded for a passing grade because they're the ones grading the homework. How does the government justify these bonuses? A Canada Post spokesperson said it needs to retain the talented, experienced people leading the corporation. Retain them for what talent? Losing $5.4 billion over the last 8 years? These bonuses aren't rewarding talent or excellent performance. They're a pervasive incentive that tells government executives failure is safe and success is optional because the bonus check comes either way. Taxpayers continue to foot the bill for failure even as the government sinks further into debt. Paying interest on the federal government's debt costs taxpayers more than $1 billion every week. Prime Minister Mark Carney told departments and Crown corporations to find up to 15% in savings. Carney doesn't need to look far to find the fat. Bonuses for failure should be the first thing on the chopping block. Franco Terrazzano is the federal director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. On the Arts and Life page, Chardonnay takes center stage in Niagara. The annual International Cool Climate Chardonnay celebration, better known as I4C, once again brought the wine world to Niagara, proving Chardonnay is far more than a familiar grape variety. It is a lens throughout which the climate, geography, winemaking skill, and regional identity can all be understood. Held recently at White Oaks Conference Resorts and Spa, the conference portion of the event, known as the School of Cool, gathered winemakers, sommeliers, wine writers, judges, and wine lovers for a deep dive into Canadian Chardonnay. The event featured wines from British Columbia, Ontario, Quebec, and Nova Scotia, showing how one grape can speak in many regional accents. The keynote speaker was Veronique Rivest, one of Canada's most respected sommeliers, named Canada's Best Sommelier and Best Sommelier of the Americas, and runner-up as Best Sommelier of the World competition. Her presentation explored Chardonnay as a national strength and one of Canada's most compelling wine ambassadors. I think that any event that showcases Canadian wines in general is important, Rive said. You will never improve if you work all alone in your winery. You have to put yourself out there, get feedback from people, and exchange with other winemakers from other places. That's how we got better. For Rive, Chardonnay is a common thread across Canada's wine-producing provinces. Despite their differences in climate and geography, British Columbia, Ontario, Quebec, and Nova Scotia all produce and produce it well. This article is quite long with a lot of other material. If you would like it to read to you directly, please call into the office. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Niagara Falls Review on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. In the advice column, Lisa Tesher relates the story. One of my daughters is very whiny, very picky, very sensitive, and to her older siblings, very annoying. Her brother, 5 years older, engages less, which is helpful in that he's not bothered by her, but disconnects from the rest of us as a result. Her older sister, only 2 years older than her, can't take it and pushes her buttons, which winds up her and makes the whole house crazy. My wife and I don't condone the youngest behavior, but her older sister makes it much worse, and then we turn our focus to her to stop whatever she's doing. She then gets very upset. We're picking on her, when really it's the youngest behavior that starts the cycle. How do we stop this cycle? It's killing me. Dear Poke the Bear, you and your wife has 4 conversations ahead of you. 1 with each child privately, and a family discussion. With your 2 older children, find out what it is their sister does that pushes them over the edge. Everyone has habits that annoy the rest of the family, in every family, but not enough to start a war. So find out what that last straw is for each of them. With your son, thank him for not engaging negatively with his little sister. Then explain how pulling away also has a negative impact on how you prefer him to lean in. With your older daughter, discuss strategies not to go toe-to-toe, but rather walk away from the situation. From her positive reinforcement, through small tokens, may work in the beginning. Now, with regards to the youngest, you may need to seek some professional help with her behaviors, and you may discover her issues run deeper than you think. Or not. Your end goal is to have a peaceful home. Yes, kids argue, kids fight, but it's a parent's job to teach them how to gauge in a healthy and harmonious fashion. A second article states, my best friend just told me she's convinced her mom is having an affair. She gave me the full rundown, which I was surprised she'd been spying on her for a few months without saying anything to me. She had said that she wanted to make sure, and now she was sure. She'd been snooping through her phone and found texts to a man very well known to the family who works with her father, and they golf together often. The wives have had many lunches, dinners, and spent evenings together through outside of their husbands. They're not friends. My friend also told me she found a bracelet in her mom's room she's never seen before, and when she came down to dinner wearing it, her mom flipped out. Her dad was sort of oblivious, but my friend knew what she was doing. Now she wants me to help catch her mother, but I don't know how or even if I want to be involved. Dear Snoop Dogg, you definitely do not want to be involved in this caper. I completely understand why your friend wants to catch your mother and what she thinks will happen. Unfortunately, no one knows how her father will react to the news or how her mother will react for that matter. Tell your friend snooping and catching her mom out aren't the best methods for moving forward. After speaking to some professionals, the consensus is this young girl should speak to both parents simultaneously. That way her mother will have nowhere to hide and her father will be confronted with the facts. I'm not sure I agree, because that places the daughter uncomfortably in the middle. Instead, you could suggest your friend talks to her mom privately first. You could also tell her, though, that you don't want to be involved. You support her and will be there for her through the tough stuff. An article on the Canada and World page states that over 100,000 jobs could be at stake if trade talks break down. Canada could lose 102,000 jobs if the Canada-US-Mexico Agreement on Trade breaks down, a new report warns. The report, prepared for the Canadian-American Business Council by Oxford Economics, studied the potential economic consequences of various CUSMA scenarios, including termination of the deal. The report says the United States would lose 214,000 jobs in 2027 if the CUSMA died. Many of these jobs would be in manufacturing industries directly impacted by tariffs, but the service sector would also feel the impact as lower disposable income causes households to reduce consumer spending and lower trade, and investment reduces demand for transportation, construction, and professional services, said the report. The successful renegotiation of the CUSMA, it says, would create 137,000 American jobs and 98,000 Canadian jobs. B. Brusky, president of the Canadian Labour Congress, said in an email that Canadian workers can't be a bargaining chip in a trade war they didn't start. There are real jobs on the line, and the government needs to be ready to defend them, she said. But protecting Canadian workers cannot mean signing a bad deal because Donald Trump threatens to walk away. Canada needs to know what it is fighting for, where the red lines are, and what the plan is to protect workers and communities if the U.S. does walk away. The report says the provinces and states affected most by the loss of the CUSMA would include Ontario, Quebec, Manitoba, New Brunswick, Michigan, Indiana, Washington, and Iowa. For Canada, the industries facing the deepest impacts from the loss of CUSMA would include autos, metals, machinery, electronics, chemicals, wood products, and paper products, the report says. The economic consequences are real, and we should go into any renegotiation with eyes wide open, Beth Burke, CEO of the Canadian American Business Council, said in an interview on Tuesday. The report said a successful renegotiation of the deal would be worth approximately $516 per U.S. household and $846 in Canadian dollars per Canadian household each year. That's not insignificant, especially in a time where affordability is pinching everyone, she said. A new round of 50% American tariffs on a range of Canadian goods is set to take effect on August 19th. Firefighters arrive from Mexico to battle blaze. Reinforcements have arrived in the battle against a deadly wildfire that has forced some 20,000 people out of their homes along the western shores of Okanagan Lake in British Columbia's southern interior. Hugh Murdoch, with the BC's Wildlife Service, had told a briefing late Monday that 100 Mexican firefighters would arrive to join the fight against the blaze that claimed one life and caused significant destruction as it roared towards Summerland. And the service said they were on the ground Tuesday. Their addition brings the number of firefighters working the Bald Range blaze to 193, with the service saying clear skies overnight had contributed to increased fire activity. Cliff Chapman, the Wildlife Operations Director with the service, told a provincial fire and drought briefing on Tuesday that conditions were so dry overnight that even without much wind, we were seeing very difficult, challenging conditions. That included elsewhere in the southern BC interior, Chapman said, such as Brunswick's complex of fires near Merritt that expanded east towards the Coquihalla Highway with an evacuation alert now overlapping the key connector with the lower mainland. Murdoch had said earlier that crews faced a monumental task with the Bald Range fire, which grew to 178 square kilometers by Tuesday, but he was confident it was being adequately staffed. It's a true firefight for the crews, he said, citing the steep terrain and hot conditions, along with spotting that was triggering outbreaks beyond the fire perimeter, limiting opportunities for direct attack. About 100 fires are burning across BC, with half out of control. Environment Canada launched a new, more targeted thunderstorm and tornado warning system this week to address alert fatigue and cut down on the number of weather alerts Canadians get on their phone. The new system will target alerts specifically to area forecasters think will be hit, rather than issue a broad warning across a large area. Alert fatigue is something that we know everyone has, Giselle Dukey, a warning preparedness meteorologist at Environment and Climate Change Canada. It's not something that we want the public to take lightly when they see a warning for severe thunderstorms or tornado warnings. We want them to know that it's likely to impact them and that they should protect themselves and others and their property from harm. Forecasters will now have the ability to draw a perimeter around the area they think they will most likely be affected and then push an alert to phones in that area. The changes will only apply to severe thunderstorm and tornado warnings. While they took effect Tuesday, Environment Canada is in the planning of an official launch for Wednesday. Dukey says the new system will also generate more specific information within push alerts than just the general area and weather threat information. It will provide a list of locations in nearby areas that could be impacted, and that list will be ordered by the time of arrival and display up to 10 different locations, Dukey said. But it will still contain all the relevant information in terms of what the main weather hazards are, like wind, hail, and heavy rain. Also, the safety information we have in our warnings. Other alerts like heat warnings and thunderstorm watches will still have broad alert areas. It's going to take some learning with the system because not everyone is going to be able to migrate at the same time to displaying the polygon warnings, Dukey said. So Environment Canada is making both zone-based warnings and polygon warnings data available. Motorists are eager to test out the new Gordie Howe Bridge. Early traffic volumes on the Gordie Howe International Bridge suggest motorists on both sides of the border were eager to test out the new crossing in the first few days after it opened to traffic. The long-anticipated bridge connecting Windsor and Detroit opened to traffic on July 27th after weeks of delay and months of political acrimony. Statistics Canada released preliminary inbound traffic figures Tuesday, showing 18,900 Canadian residents returned trips from the United States over the Gordie Howe Bridge during its first 5 days of operation. Over the same period, 18,100 U.S. residents crossed the bridge to enter Canada. The agency said 4,100 commercial transport trucks entered Canada over the Gordie Howe Bridge in the final days of the month. StatCan's data only tracks inbound trips, while motorists heading across the bridge to Detroit would be captured by U.S. Customs records. The Ambassador Bridge and the Windsor-Detroit Tunnel, normally Canada's two busiest land crossings, recorded 52,700 inbound trips over the same period, StatCan said. The agency didn't offer a breakdown between the two crossings. Taken together, the Gordie Howe Bridge accounted for roughly 44% of total land crossings from Detroit to Windsor over its first 5 days of operations. Crews painstakingly searched through rubble Tuesday in hopes of finding survivors trapped under debris after a powerful earthquake left thousands missing in dozens of cities and towns across western Colombia. Colombia President Abelardo de Espriella said at least 181 people died in the 7.4 magnitude earthquake that struck Monday. He said around 2,500 more were injured and at least 195 remain missing. Civilian-run databases suggest the number of missing could be closer to 4,000. De la Espriella also said more of the 1,000 homes were destroyed and yet more damaged. Authorities said the deaths were concentrated in cities like Cali, Pereira, Manizales, and Quevedo, but local leaders and families worried about casualties and damage in rural areas from where very little information can be retrieved. The earthquake presents the first major test for first-time office holder De La Espriella, who entered office just days before the natural disaster. The leader, who split the country in recent elections, now seeks to unite Colombia in its first disaster response. The challenge is particularly notable in the Choco region surrounding the quake's epicenter, and one of Colombia's most poorest and neglected regions, often beset by warring armed groups. Much of Choco is accessible only by boat, through the jungle, or by seaplane. De La Espriella traveled to Cúcuta in Choco on Monday night, where he announced he was mobilizing the entire military and police apparatus, as well as deploying engineers, rescue workers, and search dogs. Choco will never again be the land of the forgotten, he said. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Niagara Falls Review on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. In other world news, Russia attacked Ukrainian cities with missiles, drones, and glide bombs Tuesday, killing at least 10 civilians, officials said. As President Zelensky said, Moscow is getting new military help from North Korea for its more than 4-year-old invasion. Zelensky said Russian forces used ballistic missiles supplied by North Korea in an overnight attack on the southeastern city of Zaporizhzhia, where a company said 7 workers at a steel plant were killed and 21 injured. 3 more people, including a 15-year-old boy, were killed by Russian drones and military artillery in the central region, authorities said. In addition to the ballistic missiles, North Korea is preparing to deploy more of its troops to Russia, Zelensky said late Monday. Russian President Vladimir Putin and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un signed a strategic partnership agreement in 2024, pledging mutual aid if either country faces aggression. Kim has sent thousands of troops and huge supplies of weapons to support Putin's full-time scale invasion of Ukraine. Some experts say the engagement with Moscow is helping improve North Korea's military capabilities, and Zelensky said the battlefield experience would help Pyongyang menace other countries in its region. Ukraine says Russia is scaling up its production of ballistic missiles, aiming to exploit Kiev's critical shortage of Patriot air defense interceptors that can stop them, and claims Moscow is preparing to recruit more troops for a new push on the front line that stretches 1,250 kilometers along eastern and southern Ukraine. Every step Russia takes, increasing ballistic missile production, bringing in North Korean equipment, preparing for mobilization, all of this shows that Moscow is preparing not for peace, but for escalation, Zelensky said on social media. In an unusual step, Ukraine's Air Force didn't say in its daily report how many missiles Russia launched overnight. It was not clear whether the omission was deliberate, and Kiev officials made no immediate comment. U.S.-led diplomatic efforts to stop the war have fizzled as Washington grew frustrated with the lack of progress and its attention turned to the Iran war. In an indication that Putin is determined to press on with the invasion, Russia's highest court on Monday ordered that Yabloko, the only political party opposing the war, to be excluded from the ballot in the September 18th through 20th parliamentary election. Russian forces also struck parts of the Ukrainian capital, Kiev, overnight, according to officials. In Middle East news, Houthis kill 6 in attack on vessel. Yemeni authorities said 6 people were killed by Iran-backed Houthi rebels attacking a vessel in the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, while U.S. forces fired on a ship they said was trying to break a blockade of Iran's ports. Yemen's Coast Guard said the dead included 4 crew members and 2 members of the government-allied National Resistance Forces. Houthis fired 3 ballistic missiles at the Yemeni commercial vessel, according to the Transportation Ministry of Yemen's internationally recognized government. They are the first known deaths from Houthi rebels' attacks on shipping off Yemen in the latest bout of fighting in the Arab country. With the Strait of Hormuz effectively shut down by Iran, there's been a renewed focus on the Red Sea and Bab el-Mandeb Strait at Yemen's southern tip, which is an alternate route for Saudi Arabia to ship its oil. The deadly vessel strike came amid Houthi attacks on the government-held port city of Mocha on the Red Sea and other areas of the country. Dozens of government troops and civilians have been killed in attacks since last week, according to the Yemeni military. These strikes are part of an escalation by Houthis against government forces in Yemen and oil facilities in neighboring Saudi Arabia, which supports the Yemeni government and the kingdom's shipping in the Red Sea. The Houthi attacks could reignite Yemen's civil war following a 2022 truce and open up a new front in the Middle East war. Mohammed Abdul Salam, the Houthis' chief negotiator and spokesperson, accused Saudi Arabia in a social media post of exploiting the ceasefire to tighten an air and sea blockade it imposed in 2015. He said the Houthis are open for negotiations, but any settlement must include lifting the blockade. The U.S. military said Tuesday that its forces fired on a Panamanian-flagged ship in the Gulf of Oman that tried to evade the American blockade on Iranian ports. The move came as President Donald Trump tries to keep economic pressure on the Islamic Republic. The U.S. Central Command said the vessel had ignored warnings to stop, prompting an American helicopter to fire missiles into the engine room of the MV Villanova, disabling the ship. The statement did not say whether the ship's crew suffered any casualties. Central Command said it has redirected 55 commercial vessels attempting to run the blockade, disabled 3 non-compliant vessels, and boarded 2. The U.S. Navy currently has 15 warships, including 2 aircraft carriers and an amphibious assault ship stationed in the waters of the Arabian Sea. Iran has kept up its attacks on the ships in the Strait of Hormuz, largely shutting it off. It has refused to back down on demands that the U.S. end its blockade of Iranian ports, lift sanctions on the Islamic Republic, and fulfill other conditions. Iran effectively closed the strait after Israel and the U.S. attacked the country on February 28th. In the Congo, Ebola death toll passes 2,000. At least 2,000 people have died in Congo's Ebola outbreak, according to latest data, as rebel, conflict, bad roads, and work stoppages over payment issues challenge urgent response in a remote region. Government data show the outbreak has 4,381 confirmed cases, including 2,011 deaths. The death toll was reached almost 3 times faster than in the 2014 to 2016 Ebola outbreak in West Africa, the worst on record. In Syria, Assad was sentenced to death by court. A Syrian court on Tuesday sentenced ousted President Bashir Assad and his brother in absentia to death for murder, torture, and crimes against humanity committed before and during the country's 14-year civil war. The verdicts by a court in Damascus are the first against Assad or any members of his inner circle since his family. They are mostly symbolic because Assad and his brother Mahar had fled to Russia. In Russia, an ill U.S. Marine veteran has been released. Russia has released a U.S. military veteran who had spent more than 4 years in a prison on disputed charges and was said to be gravely ill and at the risk of dying, a group advocating for him said Tuesday. Robert Gilman was on his way to Texas, where he will be medically and psychologically assessed, said Eric Lesbin of Global Reach. In the business section, an article on theaters indicates that a strong film slate and theater presentations of the FIFA World Cup matches helped Cineplex Incorporated swing to a profit in its most recent quarter. The quarter's success was not dependent on a single blockbuster or a small number of tentpole releases. Instead, consumers embraced a broad range of compelling content across multiple genres and formats, Cineplex's CEO said on a company earnings call. He said family films were a significant driver with the release of the Super Mario Galaxy movie, Toy Story 5. Meanwhile, he said that Michael, which chronicles the life of pop star Michael Jackson, became the highest-grossing biopic ever. He said the quarter showcased one of the most diverse content slates it has seen in years. There are 5 movies that have done over $1 billion already, with Odyssey, Spider-Man, Super Mario, Michael, and Toy Story 5, Jacob said. He also said the company benefited from the Gen Z customers returning to movie theaters, with that demographic flocking to films like Obsession and Backrooms. It definitely helps the bottom line because it's very positive, and it's the audience that we most want to come back. What we're seeing is that statistics for the movie industry are saying that they are coming back in a big way. The company always screens certain World Cup games at theaters during the quarter in its partnership with TSN. The World Cup did really well for us at theaters, and it introduces our guests to other events other than just movies, Jacob said. On the earnings call, he said the Cineplex was the only company in Canada offering fans the opportunity to see matches on the big screen, and one of only a handful across North America providing the experience at scale. Jacob added that showcasing these FIFA matches has demonstrated the broader opportunity for Cineplex to be part of the large cultural moments. On Tuesday, they reported profit of $7.8 million in its second quarter compared with a loss of $2.8 million a year earlier, and posted its highest second quarter total revenue ever. In earnings amounted to 12 cents per diluted share for the quarter ended June 30th, an improvement from a loss of 3 cents per diluted share a year earlier. Revenue totaled $383.7 million for the quarter, up from $349.3 million in the second quarter of 2025. RBC analyst Drew McReynolds said in a note to investors that the revenue came in a forecasted revenues levels, but that the company fell short on adjusted profit. Given the recent run-up in the stock against the backdrop of continued box office strength in the third quarter of 2026, we view second quarter 2026 results as a modest negative for the shares at current levels, the note read. Cineplex said theater attendance amounted to 12.7 million patrons, up from 11.6 million a year earlier. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the August 12th issue of the Niagara Falls Review. We read from the Niagara Falls Review every Saturday at 7 p.m. Your reader has been Doug. Thank you for listening.
Coming up next in the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service is Off Duty. At 9 o'clock, Sports Illustrated at 9 o'clock is The Athletic from the New York Times. Stay with us for these readings and more. You're listening to your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Our volunteer radio readers broadcast daily readings of newspapers, magazines, and books. For nearly 40 years, radio reading has served people who are blind or have a print disability throughout western New York and southern Ontario's Niagara Peninsula. Our broadcast signal is provided at no charge by WNED. Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service studios are located at 1199 Harlem Road. Please spread the word about your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. For more information, call 716-821-5555. following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability.